Hey there guys, today we're taking a look at Need for Speed Heat running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5600H. This is running on the Beelink SER5 mini PC. Now we took a look at Need for Speed Unbound running on this system, and it was really struggling to do anything unless we really dropped down the render resolution. This time around we're running this at 100% resolution, and while the performance that we're getting out of this isn't incredible, it is at least playable. We're looking at a slightly above 30 FPS average, but our 1% lows are falling below that into the mid-20 section, and it really just depends on what exactly is going on in the race, whether or not you're going to be able to have a above 30 FPS experience or not. Usually the less cars that there are around you, the better your FPS is going to be. So if you're in a race where you're in the lead, the performance is going to be the most ideal, but if you're in a situation where there's a lot of cars around you and you're really struggling just to stay in around 3rd or 4th place, your FPS is going to take a bit of a dip there. It'll never fall down to a range where I would consider it to be unplayable, but it certainly isn't the most ideal situation. Now Need for Speed Unbound supported FSR, but Need for Speed Heat does not. But we can of course just lower the target render resolution within the game itself to see if we can actually boost the performance. So we can drop things down to around 70% of the target render resolution and see what that does to our overall performance. And by going down to around 70%, you pretty much end up getting a far better experience where your 1% lows are now more than comfortably above 30, though you'll never really hit 60. Your average is still going to be at a range where it's going to be more than playable, and especially if you're using a FreeSync display, you're pretty much going to be at a range where you're going to be far happier and far more comfortable like this. It's a similar situation as before, where if you're in a race with a lot of cars around you, your FPS is going to be lower, but it's not going to be to the point where it is detrimental to the experience. And once you're in the lead, the FPS is going to feel the smoothest that it will, and it's going to be the closest that it'll get to 60. In general though, it is very nice to play at this point, and visually speaking, we don't take as much of a hit to the overall quality to the point where I would say that it is completely unplayable. So this would probably be the most ideal situation. If the resolution is a little too low for you, you can always go up to 80%, or if you're fine with a 30 FPS experience and you just want to get your 1% lows just as close to 30 as possible, going down to just 90% resolution in a lot of situations actually ends up being enough to get your 1% lows bumped up enough that the overall experience ends up being at around that 30 FPS range. But 70% really does have a nice boost over the full 100% resolution, so I think it is worthwhile to give it a go and see if the resolution bothers you or not. Personally, I found it to be the most ideal situation, and in general, I think this is how I would end up playing the game. That being said, we can drop it all the way down to the 50% resolution scale to see what is the maximum performance we could squeeze out of this game. And by doing so, we really demonstrate that there are some diminishing returns to dropping the resolution. Once we go all the way down to 50%, which is around 540p, the overall experience isn't drastically different over where we were at before at just 70% resolution. Visually speaking, we do take a pretty massive hit, but we don't gain a massive boost in the overall performance. The biggest jump was definitely dropping down to 70%, and at this point you're really just trying to maximize the overall FPS that you gain out of this. If you want your average to stay at above 60 pretty much all of the time, then this is the most ideal situation, but you are taking a pretty massive drop in terms of resolution. I don't really know if I would consider this to be worthwhile. I thought that 70% resolution scaling was perfectly fine, but if you're really desperate to squeeze out every single FPS that you can out of this game, this is an option at least. In general though, this does feel far more playable than Need for Speed Unbound, and Heat is really one of my favorite Need for Speed games in a long while. So I would recommend that you probably play this instead, as it's going to be a far more enjoyable experience for you. But anyways, I hope you guys found this look at Need for Speed Heat to be useful, interesting, or entertaining. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.